The Bougainville counteroffensive was a critical campaign in the Pacific War, fought between late 1944 and 1945. This battle was part of the larger Solomon Islands campaign and played a crucial role in neutralizing the remaining Japanese forces in the region. The counteroffensive was launched by the Australian Army, which had taken over from the U.S. forces that had initially landed on Bougainville in November 1943. The goal was to push back the Japanese 17th Army, eliminate the enemy presence, and secure the island in preparation for future operations. Strategic background. Bougainville, the largest of the Solomon Islands, held immense strategic importance for both Allied and Japanese forces. The island was a key part of Japan's defensive perimeter, protecting vital supply lines between Rabaul and other occupied territories. When U.S. forces landed on Bougainville in 1943, their primary objective was to establish airfields and naval bases to support the broader island-hopping strategy, rather than engage in an all-out battle for the entire island. By late 1944, with U.S. attention shifting toward the Philippines and the Marianas, the responsibility for Bougainville's security was transferred to Australian forces. The Australians, unlike the Americans, pursued a more aggressive approach aimed at eliminating the Japanese forces entirely rather than simply containing them. The Australian counteroffensive begins. The Australian 3rd Division, under the command of Lieutenant General Stanley Savage, took charge of operations in late 1944. The counteroffensive was divided into 3 main phases, securing the southern, central, and northern sectors of the island. Southern Sector, November 1944 to February 1945. The first major Australian attack was directed at the Japanese stronghold in the south, where the 17th Army had entrenched itself. The fighting in this region was intense, with the Australians advancing through dense jungles, swamps, and heavily fortified enemy positions. The battles at the Jaba River and around the Bin region were particularly fierce, with the Japanese offering determined resistance. However, superior artillery and air support helped the Australians make steady progress. Central Sector, February-April 1945. The Central Front focused on isolating Japanese units and cutting off their supply routes. The Australians launched a series of offensives against heavily defended positions along the Puriata River and near Pearl Ridge. Despite facing relentless counterattacks and difficult terrain, the Australian forces gradually wore down Japanese resistance, inflicting heavy casualties. Northern Sector, April-August 1945. The final phase of the counteroffensive involved pushing the Japanese forces toward the northern coastline, where they attempted to regroup. Battles around the Numa Numa Trail and Ratsua saw some of the most desperate Japanese resistance. By mid-1945, the Japanese 17th Army was severely weakened, suffering from starvation, disease, and heavy combat losses. Challenges and brutal conditions. The Bougainville counteroffensive was marked by extreme environmental hardships. The island's dense jungles, swamps, and heavy rainfall made movement difficult, while diseases such as malaria took a heavy toll on both sides. The Australians had to rely on close air support, artillery barrages, and coordinated infantry assaults to overcome the well-entrenched Japanese defenders. Japanese forces, despite being outgunned and outnumbered, fought with relentless determination. Their tactics included banzai charges, jungle ambushes, and the strategic use of snipers. However, lacking adequate supplies and reinforcements, their effectiveness diminished over time. Japanese defeat and surrender. By August 1945, the Japanese 17th Army was on the brink of total collapse. Many units had been cut off, and starvation had become a major issue. When Japan officially surrendered on September 2, 1945, more than 23,000 Japanese soldiers on Bougainville laid down their arms, marking the end of the campaign. Impact and legacy. The Bougainville counteroffensive played a vital role in securing the Solomon Islands and ensuring that the Japanese could no longer use the region as a base of operations. It also demonstrated the effectiveness of Australian forces in jungle warfare, solidifying their reputation as a formidable fighting force. Despite its success, the counteroffensive remains one of the lesser-known battles of the Pacific War, overshadowed by the larger campaigns in the Philippines, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. However, for the soldiers who fought there, the battle for Bougainville was a brutal and exhausting ordeal that tested their endurance and resilience. Conclusion. The Bougainville counteroffensive was a decisive chapter in the Pacific War, highlighting the shift in Allied strategy from containment to total elimination of Japanese forces. It showcased the determination of the Australian Army and the brutal realities of jungle warfare. Although often overlooked in discussions of World War II, the battle for Bougainville was a crucial step toward the ultimate Allied victory in the Pacific.